Okay, good evening. Or is it evening yet? I suppose it's 5:30, that's late afternoon, early evening. Good evening and welcome to the Messy Connections book launch today here at University of West London. Really great to have you all here today. My name's Leon and I'm going to be your host for the evening tonight. So what we're going to do, if we can just talk you through a few housekeeping things. First of all, over there, I hope you're helping yourself to refreshments and all the sweet treats that are over there. The toilets, if you need them, are either through these doors and straight over the other side. You'll find them there, or there's some around through there. There's a disabled loo. Go through this corridor here and at the back at the end there. The running order for tonight is that, first of all, after my announcements, I'm going to bring our Dr. Cathy Sloan up on stage to talk about our book. A round of applause for Cathy. We'll have a little talk about the overall themes for the book to get us going. After that, we're having Simon Mason joining us from Hightown Pirates. Simon's going to sing a couple of songs and then join us in chat with Cathy because he's in chapter 3 of Cathy's book. After that, we have Hannah Stanislaus over here. Round of applause for Hannah. Hannah's adapted one of their poems in response to another chapter in Cathy's book, and then we are going to have another song from Simon, and then introduce Kate McCoy of Small Performance Adventures. And at the end of all of that, all your burning questions, you'll have the time to answer those, to ask those and get them answered. So thank you for joining us. It's a relaxed atmosphere as I hope you're gathering, and so do feel free to go and get yourself another drink, use the loos and all that kind of thing. So first of all, could we Cathy join us, please? Cathy Sloan, could you come and join us on the? Oops. So Cathy, welcome. The first thing I need to say by introduction, I should have introduced you actually before I got you up on stage, but your job title here, and we do like long job titles in universities, is Course Leader, BA Contemporary Theatre and Performance and BA Actor Musicianship, and Senior Lecturer in Applied and Socially Conscious Theatre. Have I got that correct? Thank you. Thank you. But in terms of the book that you've written, which is Messy Connections, Creating Atmospheres of Addiction Recovery Through Performance Practice, I think it's fair to say that that draws on your experience as a director, your experience as the Outside Edge Theatre Artistic Director, and also you kind of document the journey into setting Recovery Arts Network. Kind of fair summation.
Kind of.
Kind of, yeah. Do you want to talk?
That's a very simple highlight. So yes.
A simple overview, but do you want to talk us through the overall themes in the book then,
yes.
And where it came from, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it emerged from my doctoral research. So I had moved away from working with Outside Edge Theatre Company. I'd been a director there, worked with the founder Phil Fox for many years, and then had stepped into his shoes when he passed away. And I guess it's quite a poignant moment, a book launch like this, because I'm also aware of those who are no longer with us, and I think people in recovery are probably very aware of that as well, and that'll probably come up in our conversation with the Overdose Awareness Day initiative that Kate has done, is that the work is also about absences, and I feel that when I talk about the book, I also remember the beginning of that journey with Phil, turning up at, as I've said in an interview with you recently, at Outside Edge, feeling a bit lost on my MA studies in applied theatre, doing my geographical, coming to London, deciding what am I doing with my life next, and met Phil and discovered this whole world that really did have such a massive impact on me. And I remember the last time I saw Phil alive, he gave me a hug and he said, "You'll be the one to write the book." And
wow.
I did it, yes.
Here
I wrote the book. And so in a way, it's a kind of my service to the the arts practices that I've been involved in trying to not only document some of the practices, but also try to share the important insights of recovery that are infused throughout these types of practices. But also trying to, as I was doing my doctoral research, I realized that we kind of, years ago, we're kind of existing in a bubble. So you had Outside Edge, you had a few other kind of organizations all just trying to survive and grab whatever funding they could. And I really felt that, you know, recovery is about connection. And so to survive, we need to connect, we need to collaborate. And that's why towards the end of my thesis, I was thinking about how do we do that? And I had invented the Pop-Up Recovery Arts Cafe, and some of the people here who were at that original experiment at Central School of Speech and Drama. And they were there, and it was really interesting because it was unplanned. It was, let's just generate an atmosphere of recovery. And in a sense, the book is about this idea of what is an atmosphere of recovery, how does arts practice in a very unique way share that and curate spaces that can instigate connections. And they did, and people were starting to collaborate, and I think Kate's work is a really great example of that collaboration across the UK, but across even beyond, and collaborating with different organizations. But also it led to the next experiment, which was here, the launch of the Recovery Arts Network. And as we know, Performing Recovery magazine, there are copies of it there, it came from that. And so it is thinking about how do you use performance to reveal the unique nuance of what it means to be in recovery, as well as create those moments of connection within recovery community.
And it's been 10 years, hasn't it, since Addiction and Performance, the book was that was edited by Zoe Zonto and James, I've got to say
Reynolds.
Okay. And you wrote a chapter in that.
My first foray into writing academically.
You talk about affect and sensorial qualities of this work. Do you want to explain a bit more about that?
Do the theory bit?
Please.
Yes. Okay. So the kind of overall theoretical framework of the book is borrowing from affect theory, because back in that early chapter I discovered that theatre performance is an affective thing. It's sensorial, but also is addiction. Because, and in the book I write about addiction, my shortcut to describing addiction is extreme ways of thinking, feeling and doing. And in recovery, we learn how to have a slightly more balanced approach to thinking, feeling, and doing. not balanced completely, because, you know, life buffets us about. But that led me to thinking about affect theory and getting interested in affect theory, and how do you use that to analyze the kind of interactions that happen. But having looked at affect theory, I realized that wasn't quite enough. And so I started thinking about what does it mean to be in recovery. So that led me to Aaron Manning's process philosophy, and thinking about the being a body that's always in process, always in interaction, and part of recovery is understanding those processes, but also thinking about the ways in which society inhibit recovery led me to thinking about the assemblage of addiction. So we think philosophically about all of the human and non-human elements, or what we might refer to as the people, places and things. So avoid people, places and things. It's even the title of a play now.
Just in the West End now.
And so how does performance uniquely reveal people, places and things, those interactions, as well as allow a reconnection or rediscovery of how do we be in the world, and also renegotiate who we are, and all of the shame spirals and all of the other stuff that goes on, and the resentments, but how do we use performance not only as a kind of alternative community in which to practice being whoever we want to be in recovery, act out stuff that we need to get out. So improvisation sessions and Outside Edge were really good for that, acting stuff out, rethinking how do I be this imagined character, but also then who am I beyond that, but also generating atmospheres of recovery through performance practice, having cultural spaces that are sober friendly, that are the ways in which people can exist beyond treatment, because not everyone goes to rehab, and even those that do, you know, what's life beyond that? And as people, cultural activity, social activity is really important in developing a sense of who you are. And so where are those recovery-orientated forms of being? So what are those assemblages? And you can read the book for the theory bits, but what are those assemblages and how can I document them and those patterns, those messy connections that are in the book?
Thank you. You talk about post-human theory, and by the way, Cathy's my supervisor, and I still know about a tenth of what she tells me, but I learn so much, kind of thing. So what do we do as individuals and collectives then in practice? We just talk about people, places, things, and then there's a nuance of experience. Do you want to, in the antidote that you were talking about in the first chapter, I'm going along the wrong path there. I mean, so those are the first two chapters that you cover there. And I think we're going to dip into chapter 3 next. So I think it's probably time to ask for Simon to join us. So thank you, Cathy, for this time there. You'll be back in a second. Thank you for... So next up, our next guest... I need to put my glasses on. I need to kind of give in to this and go into this, because this is what's... Our next guest has 2 books out as well. One that has just arrived, or a booklet as he describes it, called Buried Treasure, which is the lyrics of Hightown Pirates. So Simon Mason, in 2013, wrote Too High, Too Far, Too Soon. And his latest album is on Bandcamp now, which has just been released this year, Welcome to Wilderness Hill. He's going to do 2 songs now, so could I like you to welcome onto stage Simon Mason.
Also known as Chapter 3. All right. Thank you, Cathy, for inviting me. Thank you, everyone, for being here to see Cathy. We're going to have a chat afterwards, so I'm just going to play a couple of songs and then we'll talk afterwards. Anyway, this song's called Different Drums. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, no way to live your life. Don't throw away the dreams you had when young. Seems like only yesterday my friends and I went out to play. You'll wake up on one morning, we're all gone. Yeah. Your bridges off design, or throw your songbooks on the fire. Hold close the ones that take your breath away. Paint your pictures, sing your songs. When all seems lost, we'll carry on. We're out of check because we hear different drums. Yeah. So please care. Don't be consumed by hate and fear, nor be too scared to shed a tear. Set your children free, they should not be afraid. Write the words they need to read, give hope to those that don't believe. A broken heart will always get repaired. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, no way to live your life. Don't throw away the dreams you had when young. Seems like only yesterday my friends and I went out to play. You'll wake up on one morning, we're all gone. Thank you. And I suppose I should play a song off the new album as well, just a quick plug. So I spent 30 years living in London. My addiction was very much rooted in London, but if anyone needs to hear this, the end of next week I'll be 18 years clean and sober. And I've moved to Margate, and it's all good down in Margate. People say, oh, it's Shoreditch on the Sea. They actually mean the 1973 version of Shoreditch. So I should, just in case you're thinking, oh, it's weird. We do have smashed avocado on toast. I'm hiding down in Margate. I'm on the run from the elite, with their 4x4s, bolted front doors, and their 2 left feet. The flower power kids forgot the words to let it bleed. Became the children of the revolution. They grew old, consumed by greed. The summer of love they sung about became a winter of discontent. The poems and the love letters that they wrote, well, they were never sent. There's no angels to protect us. Thieves control the press. Don't bother trying to count your blessings, man. They've robbed the lot and left. And they'll ask $1 million questions. They know we're down at heel. They want to tell you how to think, but they don't care about how you feel or know. Round our way it's all Reeboks, top knots, white socks and sliders, universal credit, cheap tobacco and shit drug suppliers. She left her knickers on the beach, she went home in a cab, came back a few days later with a bucket full of crabs. And there's no angels to protect us, the devil gets bad press. Don't bother trying to count your blessings, man. They've robbed a lot and left, and they'll ask $1 million questions when they know we're down at heel. They want to tell you how to think, but they don't care about how you feel or know. My neighbor, he's on steroids, really angry man, the kind of fella who'd put bull bars on an ice cream van. You know, we got tattoos of naked ladies with breasts that are bigger than their head, the names of 3 ex-lovers, and they're all missing, prison, dead. Well, there's no angels to protect them. Thieves control the press. Don't bother trying to count your blessings, man. They've robbed a lot and left. And they'll ask $1 million questions. They know we're down at heel. They want to tell you how to think, but they don't care about how we feel or know. luxury flats on our common ground left us polarized, divided. Seems to me it's either love will tear us apart, or it's fucking Love Island. There's no angels to protect us. The devil gets bad press. Don't bother trying to catch your blessings, man. They've robbed a lot and left. And they'll ask $1 million questions, and they know we're down at heel. Don't bother trying to catch your blessings, because they don't know how you feel. Oh no. Thank you. I apologise for the language, but not really. It's a Margate thing. Not guilty, Your Honour.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much for that. Chapter 3, as you are. So those two songs then, what the first one, what album's that off?
So that's from the second Hightown Pirates album, which was called The Other Side, All of the Above, hello, and it was called Different Drums. And then that last song was called Welcome to Wilderness Hill, which is
The title track.
Informed record that we made.
Informed. So it was 2013, wasn't it, that you wrote your autobiography?
Correct.
Too High, Too Far, Too Soon. And then in 2014, you met Cathy and the play came about. Is that how things happened?
I met, as you've already mentioned, the late, great Phil Fox, who we did another performance for something else, and he came up to me and said, "Oh, would you like to do a show?" And I assumed he meant another one-night stand. I was like, "Yeah, that'd be great." Yeah. Little did I know, his plans were somewhat more evolved than that. And it meant, a bit more than like one show. And he went away to write a script, and then he decided he didn't want to be here anymore and went to wherever it is we go or don't go after when we shuffle off this mortal coil. And then I met Cathy. Yeah.
And so the two of you worked together then, and where did the show go to, and how was that working together? Obviously forged through difficult circumstances.
Yeah, so for context, so obviously whenever I knew about the project, I knew about Simon, but he hadn't met me at the time of the R&D first R&D phase. And then unfortunately when Phil passed away, it was a case of will this project happen? And I was determined that all the projects we were committed to were going to happen. So I met with Simon and we had a chat, and it was really getting, it's that initial conversation of, you haven't met me, but I know who you are, and this project needs to happen, and can you trust to go through the same process that you'd already committed to with Phil, and trust me with your story, and to create this piece together. So it was really good that Simon, in whatever those initial conversations were, decided that yes, he could trust me. And we were about to embark on a tour of rehabs. And as we were joking about earlier, and in the middle of rehearsals, I discovered I was pregnant as well. So I was very ill most of the time. No,
nothing to do with me. I just need to be clear.
But it was like, oops, right, okay. So it was quite an interesting experience. But we toured rehabs, and then we did a 4 weeks in Tristan Bates in Soho. Yeah.
So, so in your book, in chapter 3, that you talk about the process of making the book, a lot of the making of the play was around objects, wasn't it? So how did that work in reality when you were performing and when you were putting it together?
It was kind of accidental. So I kind of explained my angle, and then I'm sure Simon will have his own opinions on that. But it began with I'd created a script based on our conversations and from the autobiography. And then first day of rehearsal, Simon, can I quote you? Simon said, "This is shit," and threw the script away. But also, I think remembering that script, all of the, it was, and in my book I explained that.
In our defence, we booked the tour, we'd booked the Tristan Bates.
Yeah.
We had like 4 weeks or something. It was
a stressful
so he was
moment.
going, I'm not going to learn this script.
Yeah.
So I had to think of a way in which I could make this happen, that he could remember and plot out some kind of narrative structure that kind of made sense. And so in the rehearsal room, I started using objects, partly because Simon's story was so attached to key moments of place and time that had quite material, we talk about new materialism in theory, and this idea of the matter, the non-human bits that make the story were quite powerful. And also in addiction, the rituals around objects are quite powerful. Yeah. And so it made sense that if I could somehow map out the stage with these objects, that I talk about Jane Bennett's thing power, that the objects evoke something. They have a power of their own, and so just by touching the objects on stage, just by some of the kind of fake paraphernalia, instantly the body kind of muscle memory remembers, and then a story emerges. And so it was an improvised show using objects to evoke from Simon memories that then were structured into a narrative, and then that you got very convincing, very natural performance, because he is in that moment telling the story of whatever that moment was in place and time. But also music was important to that. But I'm going to hand over, you can talk about that, I think, because,
well,
a lot of it came from you.
Yeah, everything you said is very much true. I'm not, I'm a trained actor, and so the first thing, as I recall, was you explained the theatrical device known as blocking on the stage. So you're there, and when you stand there, this is the story that you tell when you're there. So that made it easier for me to because we had dispensed with the script, shall we say. And of course, and I just want to give you some more credit here, is that when Phil asked me to do this, he said to me, "This will save someone's life," and that's all I needed to know. And it's all well and good writing memoirs. The thing about writing a memoir, just in case any of you guys are thinking of doing one, is then you'll meet people who have you at a disadvantage because they know everything about you and you know nothing about them. So it was a trust thing, and I believed firmly that what Phil had been doing with Outside Edge was saving lives. Recovery had saved and continues to save my life. And being an active addiction for so long, developing all these personas depending on who I was trying to convince to part with their money or whatever it was over the years, wasn't that much of a stretch then to sort of regurgitate some of that. But what kept it, I think, kind of focused was the use, as you've already said, of objects and music, because that would always centre me to that particular story in a way that words or a script would not have done. So, as Cathy writes about it in this chapter, in my previous existence, I had a little bit of notoriety in the 90s, shall we say, and I was known as the Cat in the Hat, and if you were at Glastonbury any time between 1986 and 1997, you probably owe me 50 quid. That went down well, didn't it? Anyway, so we had a collection of hats, and the hats were kind of evocative of whatever period of time of my life that was. We had the drug-using paraphernalia. We set up a stage with a sofa. We had records, vinyl. We had this trunk full of props that would come out at various points. And I think for me, as a completely untrained actor and comedian, in case you hadn't noticed, when I picked something up, it gave me something which I found a way to then project outwardly. And the other thing that we had, of course, was Rockstar Me. And I don't know whose idea. Was that your idea?
Might have been. Although it might have been me observing you used to go into this other persona when you were like the dealer, the addict version.
So we had a projector and a screen, and we went away and we filmed this persona of probably the person my younger self thought he was.
Yeah.
but probably wasn't. So you might say he was the guy informing the bad decisions, driven by ego and bluster, and a kind of rock and roll version of Donald Trump, if you want, just about an idiot, basically.
And in the rehabs, that was the character that really resonated with people. They said, yeah that's the voice in my head.
That's the addict on your shoulder, you know. And so the show was, he came and went on the screen, and that was also massively helpful as well. And I think the interaction with the audience, so particularly when we went to treatment centres, I've been fortunate enough to do some work privately these days in treatment centres and in prisons. And I think it's not fair, but it is what it is when you have an audience and they know that you know you've walked in their shoes, then you immediately have their attention. I think if you come from recovery from a different place, you have to work a bit harder. I'm not saying that's not fair. It's just how it is, because addiction does many things to you, but it makes you quite narrow-minded. So there were very different audiences to play for, to play towards, and I think much the same as people, you know, footballers would say, oh, well, you've got home advantage when you're playing at home. Some of the audiences were made up of people that probably had, I don't even know why they were there, to be honest with you.
One walked out,
Someone walked
swearing
out,
at you. That was
screaming.
delightful.
That was my sister.
No.
Seriously, my sister walked out because she couldn't cope with it emotionally. It was too much, you know. So,
but in the chapter, I also talk about objects being scriptive things, and I think that's useful in terms of, because obviously I teach devising on my course, and that when we get objects, they script narratives, and in some degree, I was obsessed and kind of concerned about when we were doing, for instance, we were doing the OD scene of you in a stairwell, and we've got the needle and the belt and the spoon, and you're cooking up this overdose hit, and I was really worried about, you know, relapse triggers, and then. And in fact, in the rehabs, we didn't even use those objects. You just mimed it, and they were so close to that world that it was still so raw. The imagined object was still there and still scripting, you know. So, but yet for you, it wasn't that was the thing that was a potential, like, emotive,
the deepest emotion I felt in I think after we'd done the West End, and then we had a rest, and then I took it away. We went up and down the country a little bit, and we did a show in Manchester on November the 11th, which was the night that my father died when I was 11 years old, back in 1979. And there's a scene in the show taken from the book where I'm driven back from, I was at a boarding school, and I'm taken home thinking my father's unwell, and I find out that he's dead. And that was the anniversary of his death, and I wasn't acting that night. I mean, the tears were real. I went there, and I would say, hand on heart, that was probably the most cathartic experience around that trauma that I've ever had. I mean, I've had, you know, I went to rehab 7 times. I've sat in countless fellowship meetings and had untold CBT, this, that, and the other, and they all have value. But there was something about going there that night for me where I finally touched it. I finally went to that place of complete despair and trauma and sadness, and then someone laughed, like completely the wrong point, but it kind of worked, and then I came back from it, and there were several instances of that. And the other thing that for me personally, towards the end of the show, there's a bit of a summing up, and depending on where we were. So if we were in a 12-step rehab, it was very prescriptive towards 12-step recovery. If we were in a non-12-step environment, it was slightly more generic. And to the public, it was a mixture of both. And that involved me taking a photograph of my then 4-year-old, 3-year-old daughter, who's never seen me use, and just for today, never will. And I put it on the table next to a photograph of my dad when he was a young man. And the catharsis of that was also something that I don't think I realised how beneficial that had been for me, probably for months. And then it dawned on me one day that I'd sort of circled that, you know.
So in the chapter, I talk about objects being dramaturgical tools, being scripted things, but then also how can that support recovery by changing the relationship with objects. And so that's a perfect example of that kind of full circle. And then in the second half of that chapter, when I'm talking about portraits of recovery and their Kintsugi project, and the idea of repairing objects but being proud of your scars, because often a lot of this performance work is, in a sense, trying to move beyond shame and the shame-bound identity. And the beauty of that Kintsugi project was, and the end of the performance with Simon was about, yes, here's all of the shit and the stuff that happens and the shame and the trauma, etc. But actually, here's also the strength and the beauty in recovery and being able to wear those scars and with pride. And I feel the importance of this performance work is about actually honouring and being aware of the unique insights of people who are survivors and are here just for today and present in the moment, and maybe have insights that the rest of us need to take heed of. So there we go.
Thank you. And just for today is the next song that you're going to play, isn't it? So
It is.
I'd like to say thank you to Cathy and Simon and thank you for playing, Simon. Thanks. Our next guest, glasses back on, postcard here. Our next guest is a published poet. Their first poetry book was called Extremely Aggressive, Uneducated and Rough. And this title was a Facebook comment that was made about them. And so this poet used that phrase and made it the title of their first book. So took ownership of that. Hannah set up Lost Souls events. It's a regular poetry night taking place in Wandsworth in the Spread Eagle and the Exhibit in Balham, and has also just started a new night in the Two Brewers as well down in Clapham, and also is just back from America, having completed a Churchill Fellowship across 4 states in the US, having travelled with the organisation Poetry in America, which I know from knowing Hannah has been an amazing experience. And just to finish on Hannah's introduction there, they won 2 state poetry slam. They are poetry slam champions of 2 states of America, just from travelling in over 4 or 6 weeks or so. Finally, Hannah was also in the South by Southwest Education Conference and Festival, and I'd like you to welcome Hannah Stanislaus onto the stage, please. So Hannah's adapted a poem and in response to chapter 4 of Cathy's book.
Trigger warning of sexual violence and foul language. She lies face down in the gutter, no knowledge of where she is. How did it come to this? Started as an innocent night out at 18, now she's 33 and a full-on junkie. Rejected by society, no home, no family, no money. Raped by a punter and her pimp disappeared. Threw the money at her and sneered, fucking slag. And yet she should be part of #MeToo. Yet that hashtag only applies if you aren't in the dole queue. See, everybody knows what happened, but no one cares. The way our girl lives her life is truth or dares. Is this the way it's going to end? Face down, avoiding the world, not a single friend. The ambulance arrives just in time, CPR and a blues and twos ride. Get to the hospital, no sound of her cry. Now the nurses have to tell her parents that their beautiful daughter died. I can't begin to tell you how badly we need to see addicts that live in our community. You see, that alcoholic drug addict you see on TV, that was me. How about having some love and empathy? The change in how we treat them in our society. Every woman deserves to be heard. Any woman can be lured into that pain, addiction, crime and destitution. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. So thank you so much. It's great to see you, and thank you for adapting your poem there for Cathy's chapter 4. What was it in the chapter that resonated for you from reading it?
So, I like the title, Like Butterflies. There was something about it that was innocent, you know? And that I had the image, first of all, about a cocoon turning into a butterfly and flying away. But I already had a poem that I'd written. It was called Cry or Die, about a girl that goes out, has a night out, dies. But when I read the chapter, it was about the fact that this woman, she hasn't got a choice about what she does. She has to feed her addiction, and her partner is the one that does what he does in the alleyway. And the fact that he disappeared and she was left, that hit me, you know. And I thought, that's what I can use. And then when she gets in to a place of safety and goes to get a job, and it's just like, if that was you, you'd want someone to help you. And yet, how we look at addicts is, well, you're an alcoholic, you can just stop drinking. You're an addict, you can just stop using. And that's not how it works. And that's what led me to create the final piece.
Thank you, thank you. So you're referring there to, it's Sonia Hale's play, isn't it? Like Butterflies.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us?
Yeah, so so this is the chapter 4, isn't it? Places of recovery.
Places. And
one of the examples of practice that I put in that chapter is Sonia Hale's Like Butterflies. This is another moment of absence because Sonia Hale unfortunately passed away during the sort of lockdown. She was younger than me. And I met her at Outside Edge, and she worked with us and has been became a prolific writer for stage in recovery. And she wrote plays for us at Outside Edge. She also wrote plays for Clean Break, but she had such a beauty in the pattern of her speech. And so in the chapter, I used chunks from Like Butterflies because there's no other way to capture the performance but to kind of quote some of the huge chunks. And I really liked the way she disrupted narratives or assumptions around rough sleepers, where we kind of walk past them in London on the street and we just kind of, we're all guilty of that kind of, walk past, don't want to see. But yet she wrote with such beauty this, and I quote this paragraph where she talks about creating this snug, cush-up kind of little home space out of bubble wrap out the back of a Tesco's, and with her boyfriend at the time, or the character, Shelley's character at the time, the character in the piece. And I really liked the way this temporary place, it kind of disrupted what we think of when we see the street, and how a street can be a home or a cozy home. But it's also, she uses in her language in the piece, the street also becomes the concrete becomes very much an abrasive, whenever she describes the sexual assault, this abrasive acting against her body. And then what really moved me when I was interviewing Sonia was that, about this piece, that she wrote it at the time of #MeToo, the whole Harvey Weinstein thing. And so we were seeing in the media the attention towards quite high profile celebrities. And yes, it was good to out this, and I know the theatre world, or like my colleagues out there, the theatre world has changed. We have intimacy coaching, we have all sorts of, there was the #no grey area from the Royal Court Theatre. So there was a lot of change, or beginnings of change in the way in which performer training was happening. But yet, the story that I remembered from Sonia was she was saying, but violence like that doesn't happen to people like me. In other words, it's where's the compassion for the woman who is the street drug user? Does she get compassion too, or and I think that then compounds feelings of shame and the difficulty, the particular gendered experience of women in addiction, which those stories, those difficult narratives I've heard around losing children, around gender violence and other complications that are the assemblage of the gendered and also the racialized experience of addiction, which makes it more and more difficult to get into and stay in recovery. And so I felt that story was so important as a kind of example of the need to not only disrupt our notion of thinking about place and gender and compassion, but also then in the second half of that chapter, and I talk about outside edge being like an alternative home space. So where are those safe spaces?
And that's a big thing for us in recovery as well, isn't it?
So I relate to the homeless bit, but not on the street. And it really struck me that you can see someone who's in addiction, who's homeless. But for myself, I was in temporary accommodation. I started in a women's refuge with my little baby. And it's homeless, but it's not, because you have a roof over your head. And being on a bottle of whiskey and 30 cocodamol tablets a day, no one knew, because I was behind closed doors. And that was 7 years ago. And when I read the chapter, I thought, well, if I use again, that'll be me. I will go on the street, because I haven't been on the street yet. And as Simon alluded to, on the June 6th, God willing, I'll be 4 years sober and clean. Thank you. And it's that story, when I read the piece about, the fact that she gets into safety and gets the job, that's me now. But I didn't go the homelessness route on the street. And that misconception of users being dirty and homeless is wrong. It's wrong. But it's the hashtag Me Too as well. You can be a Hollywood actress and it's really shocking, but this happens every day to women like Shelley and me, and it's just highlighting that. It's really important.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Cathy. Round of applause, please. Thank you. I'm going to welcome back onto stage. He's just grabbing his guitar. Simon, who's going to play once again for us. Play just for today, aren't you? So thank you, Simon.
Talk amongst yourselves for a second. Sorry, it's this capo thing, it throws me every time. One thing I would say, whilst I'm clumsily trying to put my guitar in tune, which doesn't seem to want to go in tune, is that when we did the performance, when we did the show, all the music in the show was music that had, I guess, soundtracked my own life. And all through my active addiction, I'd been in various bands I don't know what I was trying to do, trying to make it, I suppose they'd say. And subsequent to doing the show, and I guess I'm trying to give credit where it's due, is that I went on and started working with musicians and creative people as a sober coach. Oops, it's still not right, is it? And have managed to write and record 3 albums in the last 6 years. So, go me, really. I still can't tune a guitar. was talking to Hannah before we started, and the most common misconception I have when I work with creative clients, musicians, as a coach, is that they almost always say to me, yeah, you know, if I don't drink or use drugs, then I'm not going to be able to write or perform. And that's not been my experience. There you go. Sorry. Sorry. Can you pass my glasses? I can't actually see either. Vanity is a terrible thing. Let me see what I'm doing. There we go. I'm going to leave my glasses on. Anyway, so this is a song from the first Hightown Pirates album. This is called Just for Today. The new rock star struggles with those old rock star troubles, and his new friends think he's okay. And who's to say? Ends up in the Ville, DF's for his chills, and a parcel along the way. Well, not today. Hacks think he's cool, they need a rock and roll fool. Yeah, I saw it all yesterday. I walked right in, crawled away, I crawled away. So here's to tomorrow, you're all out tomorrow. For you and me, it's just for today. 'Cause you know that tomorrow, well, it ain't ours to borrow. For you and me, it's just for today. Just for today. We're inside a bubble, oh X Factor nothing. Well, we're here today and you're gone today. Did Simon say? It's the old soldiers struggle and their new Labour crumbled. Fucking Nazis steal the day. They're back again. Nothing's changed, 'cause nothing's really changed. So here's to tomorrow, we're all out tomorrow. You and me, it's just for today. 'Cause you know that tomorrow, well, it ain't ours to borrow. You and me, it's just for today. tomorrows. For you and me, it's just for today. 'Cause you know that tomorrow, it ain't ours to borrow. For you and me, and you and me, and you and me, it's just for today.
Thank you, Simon. Another round of applause, please, for Simon Mason, Hightown Pirates. Thank you so much. By way of introduction, before I invite Cathy back up on stage and our final guest for tonight, I want to introduce Kate McCoy, who's set up small performance adventures in 2018, but has a history of working in participatory arts practice that goes way beyond before that. So Kate is a prolific collaborator with organisations such as Not Saints, Edit Suite and Cascade in Brighton, and then TIP and Portraits of Recovery in Manchester. So Kate's been involved quite heavily in taking a lead in cultural activities around Overdose Awareness Day on the 31st of August. And I'd like to invite Kate and Cathy back onto stage to talk about Chapter 5, I think, isn't it? Chapter 5. Thank you.
Oh, it's different up here, isn't it?
Yes, dazzling lights, isn't it? Yeah. So Kate, the project Terminal Uniqueness, could you tell us something about that, please, and about where the phrase came from as well?
Yeah.
That's
Okay, so terminal uniqueness. One of the things I like about terminal uniqueness is that you can make up your own meaning. It's a very evocative phrase, and it comes from. It's particularly. I'm going to show off now. I found out about it when I was in New York. Just a bit of a show off there, and it's a term that's used in American recovery, and they would describe it as personal exceptionalism. How I would sort of describe it is that as human beings, all human beings, we're trying to exist in a place that's between dignity and humility. And if we stay in those bounds, we're probably doing okay. But when we go if we've got dignity over here and humility over there, when we go beyond dignity into arrogance, I'm so special, the rules don't apply to me, nobody can understand me because I'm so great. And the other end, which we've all been to too, but they're very similar to this won't work for me, I'm the worst person in the world, all of that stuff that we do as humans. It's a human thing. I think it's present in recovery, but it's essentially a human thing that, we're so unique that it's terminal. And actually that's what it's saying, that there's a level of uniqueness. And how do we as human beings, because we want to be separate entities, but we're part of communities. So that phrase came playing around my head. And we had a lovely, lovely project plan that was, I think the first day of it was going to be the 13th of March, I think, wasn't it, Chris? Yeah. And we would work with 7 or 8 Ronan, and we were going to create this amazing project with guest artists, and we were going to look at how can we improve our mental health collectively by kind of acknowledging the ways in which we're unique, but really, really acknowledging that we can be unique and different, but we still are really connected. And that actually, if you wake up at 5 a.m. feeling shit, there'll be hundreds of other people in the world feeling the same, and maybe that would be helpful. But unfortunately, that thing happened, which
2020.
2020.
Yep.
And so on the day, we decided we wouldn't go ahead with the first day of the project. Partly, we did have an 80-year-old person in our group as well, so it was partly that, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And so a couple of us, including Annie from Edit Suite, because we're a sort of collective of recovery organisers in Brighton, and Jax from Not Saints came round to my flat, and we went, well, let's do something. Let's do a thing online. And we set up a Facebook group just asking people to send in videos we picked a colour for the week, send in a video, 3 coloured objects in your home, really simple. And then people started doing pictures. And I've been working with some people in Nigeria and New York, and all these young people from around the world joined. And we had a community of nearly 1,000 people. We had like a little 3-year-old boy from Pakistan telling us about his little yellow truck. It was incredible. And then one of the other things I've always tried to do with small performance adventures is actually find employment for people in recovery. And during the pandemic, the money thing was important. So got some money from the places where we can't get the money from anymore, but those places when we could get the money, and did these £100 mini commissions for artists in recovery to create pieces of performance in response. And it was lovely because it got people out of the house as well, because they go outside. Like Ronan did a piece called, there were 3 artists in recovery who'd all moved from London, and they did a piece called City Boys by the Sea, and actually went out and did something and got money, and then we had watch parties. So it's sort of emerged.
And
Is
then
that-
the
have I answered that
irony
properly?
is, though, I got this invite on Facebook to this Terminal Uniqueness Facebook page, and it was just about to go into lockdown, and one of the first tasks was find something yellow in your home and take a picture. Yeah, so I'd done the picture and thought, yeah, this is fun. I'm going to see how this goes. And I just love this idea of like connection. And then the next day I had COVID, and I had really bad COVID, which became long COVID, which meant being confined to my bedroom for months. And
You were
the
still
house
taking
I
part
was-
then through this?
And
or
I was so ill I couldn't really, because it just existing was an effort for a long time, and it was that time nobody really knew what it was either, so it was a bit scary. So in my bed though, I'd be following this Facebook group and then the watch parties, and it reminded me of that need for connection. And messy connections, the whole point of the book. And so this felt very much like a really important chapter that's beyond my doctoral research, which is thinking about this idea of creative kinship, and that through creative activity, you create a sense of connection, a sense of belonging, not just in terms of vicariously through this Facebook page, which was such an important thing to do. I mean, I felt it was just such an important thing and so impactful. Such a simple idea, but yet something that we all really needed, and staying connected to a recovery community of sorts, and recovery broadly. So not necessarily addiction recovery, but people, even practitioners who work in that field, and just that sense of being with like-minded people who get what it's like to struggle a bit. And that felt really important for me, and I wanted to be able to articulate that in the book. And I also felt very moved by this idea of terminal uniqueness, which is something that you do I think we as humans do struggle with, and also a reminder of, no matter how bad it is or how special your woe is, get over yourself, but also get support, but also connect with others, and you realize that actually you can move on, or you can, there's something to do. But connection, the idea is positive connection, because in the whole people, places and things, the assemblage of addiction, it's connection to things that are kind of problematic, toxic connections, affects that are encouraging those extremes of thinking, feeling and doing, whereas the kinds of connections that we're having through this artistic community were positive, nourishing, affirming.
And we did have, I still have people, about at least 7 or 8 people have sort of fed back and said that it was one of the things that just kept them going through the pandemic, which is just kind of, I feel like it's sort of emerged and evolved, and it had a lot of unexpected consequences. What I really love about things, you kind of start an idea and then all this other stuff happens, and the community took it forward.
And to kind of go back to the previous chapter I mentioned about alternative home spaces, often in recovery, but just in general, family and home are complicated things for people. And so I can resonate with that, and also therefore the idea of kinship being, what are the alternative forms of belonging? Who's our chosen family or our chosen kin? That, borrowing from Donna Haraway's notion of kin in terms of also the non-human, and thinking ecologically about who we are in this world, in the universe, and how do we make those connections that are positive and productive, and moving beyond the kinds of problematic kinship that you in your own research know all about.
With. Yes. Yeah. And so, artists in recovery, what can we do as a collective then? What is there's a point as you come towards the end of the book as well, where you start to bring in about setting up the Addiction Recovery Arts Network. So was that partly inspired by small performance adventures?
Yes, I would have to say, and I think this is a good point to move on to the Overdose Awareness Day, because I remember, I don't know if you remember, during my PhD research I had you, Mark Prest and Zoe in Liverpool, yes. and we were having you indulged me by having this conversation about what is the future, what is recovery arts. And that was because I really had this hunch of having been working in the bubble of Outside Edge and knowing how insular it could be, just trying to survive, but also the importance of the work. How do you grow it? And also, when the founder of a company suddenly dies, and then you've got a board of trustees panicking about whether the company's going to fold, and then thinking, well, actually, no, this work is serving people and it needs to continue. So my thinking was about how do you make this grow? And I think, Kate, your work and your collaborations with the Small Sweet Saints is a real testament to that, to think about it's not all about being in your own bubble, it's about how do you connect. And Overdose Awareness Day initiative is a really brilliant example of that.
So talk about Overdose Awareness Day. That's the cue for that. That's what I was doing. So and I just think that for me, all of the work evolves. It isn't necessarily planned, and it's always very much
messy.
It's messy, and it's also very much about the collective. So in all of the Overdose Awareness Day stuff that we've done, no individual is mentioned by name on any of the publicity or anything that we've done. It's always the names of the organisation. So in 2018, Pete Davis, who is the director of Cascade Creative Recovery in Brighton, said, "Oh, do you think you could get a flash mob thing together for Overdose Awareness Day?" And we were like, "Oh yeah," and hadn't really thought about it. We thought like, "Oh, it'll be about raising awareness." We hadn't really thought about what it might do. And we did, the choir sang Hallelujah, we sort of walked and fell a bit, and people were really moved. And I just remember that how it became something else was that Jax, who had performed in it, I think we were all quite buzzing because we were quite scared of like, we're just going to turn up in a shopping centre in Brighton and then at Pavilion Gardens and we're going to play Hallelujah and then we're all going to fall over. I mean, this might not be okay. And I'm a bit nervous about directing movement. I don't really know what I'm doing, so it could also be shit as well. But it seemed to go quite well. And in fact, one of the first feedbacks was, one of the people in the audience said that she wished that her dad had a creative community around him and maybe he'd still be here. But when we did the evaluation, because obviously we're very responsible and we evaluate everything assiduously, Jack said, "Oh my God, wouldn't it be great if we did this all over Britain?" And I was like, okay. And we thought we'll start with Bristol because Bristol Drugs Project have a drama group and a choir, yeah, which is what we had. Unfortunately, Chris from Not Saints, who runs a record label, but is also brilliant at, for me, he does everything technical, everything publicity-wise. I just go, "Chris, can we do this?" And his positive belligerence carries us through. And he's like, "Yes, well, we can live stream the performances in Bristol and Brighton simultaneously." So we did some simple choreography. We worked with a brilliant artist, Luann Taylor, who taught us some Buto stuff. And Chris and I went to Bristol and taught some of the movements to them in Bristol, but as a starting point. And so that's what we did that year. And then the following year, we got Outside Edge on board. We got the Theatre Royal Plymouth on board. And then that was 2020 again. So it became... But then we did this amazing stuff where we did make a film in Brighton on the beach because we were there. And we made some films with... I did Zooms with Outside Edge, and we did phone, and we came up with 4 films to a brand new version of Hallelujah. We had created in Plymouth and Brighton. And then the following year, is this too long? Am I okay? We're sure? Okay. In 2021, we actually got, so it was all done on a shoestring, we actually got some Arts Council funding to do it properly because we'd assumed that everything pandemic-y would be over. And we decided that we would commission New Note Orchestra to create a brand new piece of music for it, and Paul Bayers from Fallen Angels would do the choreography. And of course, it ended up being mostly on Zoom. But I think one of the things, you say this in the chapter, is that had the pandemic not still be going on, we'd have probably just worked with the groups individually in the different cities. But because of the pandemic and the Zoom thing, we all met on Zoom. So people were meeting from across the country, and we had these Zooms sometimes with 80 people on them. And so we learnt the choreography, and each place chose where they were going to film it. And so we created this film with everybody. So all the things about it are bringing people together And it became, as well as it's about honouring people who've died by creating a beautiful piece of art that's in memory to them. And I think Ronan, I would ask Ronan to say what he said, but you might not remember what it was. But one of the beautiful things that Ronan said about it was that because we were doing non-verbal things, it was a way of working through your own grief non-verbally. So there were all these different things were happening, and we all came together, and people felt supported in their own journeys, their own responses to overdose, people who we'd lost, people who were still here. And then I think I've said a lot in one go there, so I'm going to stop for a moment unless there are further questions.
But I do think then round about this kind of emergence of Zoom as a form of enabling creative collaboration, there was also the beginnings of us meeting online. Yeah. So we had Geese Theatre, I think maybe Chris was there.
Geese were involved in 2022.
Yeah, so there was these emerging from these collaborations. Then we started having chats, which then became the beginnings of the Addiction Recovery Arts Network, because we'd have chats going. To survive, to grow, to exist within a really difficult economic climate where who wants to fund this kind of work? And the work needs to continue. It needs to be a sustained. So I talk about needing for sustained relations of care. It needs to be iterative. It can't be
one-off projects are not enough.
No, exactly, because it needs to become part of someone's recovery practice or a recovery alternative community, alternative family, and so. When we were having these conversations, then we were trying to find ways in which to create reasons for this. And having finished my PhD and got my first, I had my first kind of temporary academic job, and then I got the job here. And then I discovered the world of knowledge exchange and Seed Fund. And so I thought, what could I do with this? How can I serve this community, use this bit of funding? And so we had the Addiction Recovery Arts Network launch, which kind of came from those conversations and me thinking, okay, I had this initial idea that I tried out at the end of my PhD, the Pop-Up Recovery Arts Cafe. How can I do a grown-up version of this? But also, how can I support these artists to get together? And there's so many more collaborations that have emerged from that, like the New Note and Fallen Angels, and
the Opera House.
Yeah, the Royal Opera House,
and then
and ongoing connections, and who knows what next.
Vita Nova met Fallen Angels.
Yes.
They're collaborating now. Yeah. It's,
and the birth of the Performing Recovery magazine.
The story continues.
Alex is hiding somewhere.
It would seem a good point now to bring back on Simon and Hannah on the stage to join Kate and Cathy, and if there's any questions from the audience. So thank you, Kate and Cathy.
I'm just staying put until I'm told otherwise.
Can you two share a microphone?
Oh no, got his own.
Are there any questions? I need to put this on microphone, don't I, for the YouTube. Is there anybody who has any questions from the audience? Would you like... Oh, we have a microphone for the audience as well. Any questions from anyone? I'd like to ask, actually, what can we do collectively as artists in addiction recovery and what are we, following on from what you're talking there about the network, and what is it that arts and addiction recovery has to offer people who are outside that world or see themselves outside of that world? Do any of you have any opinion on that?
I have a little opinion on that. Just to mention something that hasn't been brought up so far, which is the Recoverist Manifesto, which is you can probably do more of the detail of it, but it's basically saying that, not everybody might be in recovery, but we can all be recoverist, because it's a state of mind, and it's a set of skills and a set of resiliences that actually people, those of us not in recovery, can learn a hell of a lot from. So I think it's that reframing something that's seen so negatively and stereotypically as a superpower.
I think that the thing that I face most in the poetry world is everybody thinks that the money's only going to go one way, and for performance and poetry and music and collaboration, I think that not-for-profit organisations can be the way forward. and then everyone can share. I find that money and performance muddy the waters, and I'm taught to keep it, I have to give it away freely. And it's that paradox that needs to change.
From a research angle and knowledge exchange perspective, I think it's important that there's an awareness and understanding of how these performance practices and the insights they reveal about specific lived experience, particularly from lived experience of being in recovery, and how these performance events and cultural activities can create atmospheres of recovery, that this, I suppose this is the pitch for my research and Zoe's as well, Zoe's aunties as well, is that we can give insights into how addiction recovery support services and policy around drug policy, and the kind of the government policies around how addiction services are funded or treated, or what those models should be, that in fact the insights that we can share can inform new ways of thinking about policy. And that there is that thread that runs through my book when I talk about the post-humanist approach to addiction, that you were trying to ask me earlier, which is challenging the medicalized model of that influences addiction support recovery. And there is a purpose for it, but actually it doesn't really appreciate the lived experience. So it's one thing to say addiction is an illness and we'll treat it with this funding, but actually you need to get under the skin of what does it mean to be in recovery, and what are those assemblages of the human and non-human that impact the sensorial experience of being in the world. Performance can do that in such a powerful way, and therefore it can influence and contribute better ways of knowing, better ways of understanding what recovery should be. And that one particular angle for me is that there needs to be creative activity in recovery, because you can't send someone to rehab, go, right, you're dry now. Well, so you're a dry drunk or a dry, former drug user, but the rest of your life and all of the complicated messiness of feeling your feelings needs to happen next. And performance and artistic expression is a really good way of doing that.
My rather simple answer to that is we just need to do more, which is a typical addict's response to everything. Just do more, because it's a difficult argument. Or as I've mentioned before, I played that last song very badly. Sorry about that. When I work with musicians that are still embroiled, caught up in addictive, alcoholic, destructive behaviours, they always say the same thing. What about the Rolling Stones? What about the Beatles? They did loads of drugs. They were great. Yeah. And that is true. I can't argue with that. However, I think as times have changed, and those of us that are able to be visible in the wider world, because not everybody is, we are still heavily prejudiced against. That if I went to a job interview and said, "Did you know I used to beg money to inject crack in my groin?" And they'll be like, "That's really nice. Next." You ain't getting the job. We still live in that world, unfortunately, whether I've been clean for 18 days, months or years, And to me, that's really at the centre of what I've tried to do. I know what we're trying to do. I know Chris is trying to do it with Not Saints, is to show that actually people can and do change. And the best version of yourself as an artist, in whatever format that might present itself, might yet happen. You until you try, you don't know. So, I've had numerous people saying, "Well, it's all well and good for you. You do. I've got to get on stage and do that," and they don't give themselves that opportunity. And for me, no matter what philosophy of recovery people gravitate towards, because there are more than one, and there's no one size fits all, and that's the truth. I think the most powerful thing anybody can do is show me, don't tell me. And so we just need opportunities to show people. I can tell clients till I'm blue in the face, you can do this, but they have to do it, and you have to create that space. And there's a lot of hand holding and involved in that, but they need to be inspired. And I think so. When I say we need to do more, those of us that are able to be out about our previous existence, because as I've said, not everybody can, need to do more and collaborate as often as we can, because the more we do, the more people will see it.
The opposite to addiction is creation, as Alex's partner, where's Alex, came up with. Are there any questions from the floor at all? Or do I? I'll do one more then, and then we'll, and then we can. Oh, okay.
Hi guys. So it was really interesting to hear how over COVID, Zoom was a really big tool for helping everyone get together. Do you feel that the advancement of digital technologies has helped people come to terms with what they have, and also to help other people through recovery?
I got sober and clean on Zoom. So my sobriety date is June 6th, 2020. And if it wasn't for Zoom, I'd be dead. I think that whatever came out of COVID, for me personally, and I can only speak for myself, it saved my life. Because on the same day that I got sober and clean, I wrote my first poem. And I'm on 760 poems in nearly 4 years. It's my therapy. It did for me, technology did for me what the physical meetings of fellowship do. So that's my input.
And we have platforms where we can share our stories to wider audiences. I know there's 5 million people watching this live stream. Hi, Mum. We have opportunities that perhaps a few years ago we didn't have. And our stories and our ideas can be shared in a way that a few years ago was unimaginable. So someone's mentioned this need to change. We need to evolve and change and use and harness any platform technology that we can, because we cast our net very wide. Not everybody's going to hear it. Not everybody is in that space that you need to be, where you hear the message, whatever that message is, But it doesn't mean to say we can't keep throwing that net out. And as I said before, when Phil asked me to do the play, and I was surprisingly, he said, "You'll save someone's life." And we, and that's Cathy and Phil and the people that put the show on, I know for a fact, because I met that person and they've become friends. And I go to Liverpool regularly because, as you can tell by my accent, I'm a Liverpool fan, so I'm up there all the time. And I stay at this kid's house, and he's 10 years sober, and he came to see the play in Liverpool, and he walked out and he hasn't drunk since. So, that's the old-fashioned way of going on the road, and doing performances, but the road can come to us.
Just to add to that, I think it's a tool like any other tool, and it can be used well, and I think we shouldn't get too over it. When we think, this is the thing that will change the world, I think it's a tool, and I think probably people, like you're saying, people who've been reached who wouldn't have been reached during the pandemic, but also don't underestimate that maybe the thing that happens is just a physical touch to somebody and a moment and some eye contact, and when you're on Zoom, maybe you're not... There's some additional connection, but there's also failure of connection. So I just think we need to keep all of the tools in mind and not get over like, this is the one.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think in the book I'm talking about the affective experience, and there's nothing like live performance. You cannot replace that. However, you can augment the level of connection that you have by going digital, and certainly when you don't have lots of funding for traipsing across different parts of the UK and different countries, then Zoom and those digital technologies can assist. But also the Performing Recovery magazine is digital for that reason as well, because we're discovering work in the US, in other parts of the world that we would never have been able to do. But live is still best, I think.
If you can buy drugs on the darknet, you should be able to recover as well. That's what you call a transferable skill, I think, in recovery.
Thank you. Are there any final words from the panel at all that you want to... Or is there one more question? Cool.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about creative recovery. I was creative before I got sober as a musician and stuff. So when the explosion of creativity that happens in sobriety comes, I had some idea what to do with it. And there was lots of organisations to get involved with as well when I came to Brighton. And I see it in young people, and they're eager to do. And people, I was in my 50s when I came in. But what about the older generation? You know, I wonder how you connect with them. There is an issue in recovery in my head anyway, and it's known about, you know, those people that might be 70, late 60s, 80 on their own, drinking at home. How do we reach them? You know, what tools do we use for that?
I mean, I'll just say, Small Performance Ventures have recently put in 2 Arts Council bids to try and do work with older people in recovery, and we've had 2 knockbacks, so that's where we are. But I think it is important, and I think you make a good point, and I don't have an answer at the moment. Resubmit the bid.
I think so. Again, the bit right about communities of recovery. And the reason why I talk about communities is because I think there are lots of invisible communities. I mean, there's the older, and that is a thing, that people of a certain age, retired, etc., isolated, alone drinking, etc. But there's also LGBTQ plus community, women trapped in coercive controlling relationships who can't access recovery. There's young people, children of addicts, homes, environments, and so we need to think about those kind of cultural activities. Where is the support, the funding for all of those plethora of different types of engagement arts practices that can reach all of the communities in recovery that need recovery?
I think that the basic connection of community, person to person, we've lost it somewhere. When I set up Lost Souls, I started in a church, and we moved to a bar, unfortunately, because there are no sober social spaces. But our poets range from my daughter, who's 8, who wrote something once and was like, "Mummy, can I perform?" to a woman who was 92, who'd never performed before. So I think that it's, you start at community level, what you can do, and then grow it from there. That's the important thing, because government's not going to do it. Higher up, they don't care, and it's that looking after each other.
Are there any more questions from the floor?
No, I didn't have a question, but I was just going to point out that today we had a message from somebody in New Mexico who is working with working in an old person's home with a Native American group who contacted us through the website, asking for resources in order to help with a recovery festival that they're putting on. So that kind of probably answers the last 2 questions, funnily enough. The recoveryarts.org website, we get more and more people actually contacting us, our network, just to ask about the things that they can do. They want to get involved. It's a really kind of exciting thing that's going on.
Thank you, Alex. I like how you got a plug in there for the Addiction Recovery Arts Network. Alex is the editor of Performing Recovery and also a New Note Orchestra member from Brighton. I'm going to call this a day, and I'm going to say a massive thank you to Kate McCoy. Can we give her a round of applause, please? Simon Mason, Cathy Sloan, Hannah Stanislaus. Go and buy or borrow Cathy's book. It is an exceptional read, and I think as an artist in recovery myself, and meeting Cathy 2 years ago, and the worlds that have opened up to me, and there's just a really exciting moment, I think, at the moment right now in addiction recovery arts, and it's really wonderful of you all to come here and be here. And there is another event on in 10 minutes, so all those cakes need to be eaten before then. So can I direct you to that, and can I thank you for coming along? Thank you, Cathy Sloan, for making this all possible. Big round of applause for Cathy. And thank you to everyone watching online on YouTube. Big wave.